You know when you think a family has reached its breaking point and then they prove you wrong by tearing open a brand new wound? That's exactly what's happening on this season of Welcome to Plathville. On one side, we've got a love story that's racing so fast it feels like it could spin out of control at any second. Lydia Plath, the quiet, faithful daughter who has always played by the rules, is suddenly center stage in a romance so whirlwind that it's shocking even by reality TV standards. She and her boyfriend Zach have decided to wait until marriage for their very first kiss, but at the same time, they're moving so quickly toward marriage that even her siblings are left with their jaws on the floor. The tension is building, and you can already sense the storm that's about to hit. And just when you think that's enough drama to carry a whole season, another fire starts burning. Over in Florida, Micah's girlfriend Veronica is clashing head on with Mariah and Barry, and it's not the small kind of disagreement you can brush off. It's explosive, it's personal, and it cuts right to the center of who's telling the truth in this family and who's rewriting the narrative. Once close friends, Veronica and Mariah are now fractured beyond repair, and the fallout is pulling Micah straight into the middle of a loyalty war that he never asked for. Hi, friends, my name is Maya Rose, and welcome back to Sister Wives Chapter. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of these deep dives into the messy, heartbreaking, and shocking worlds of reality TV families. And if you've been following this drama, I want you to comment down below. Do you think Lydia is rushing into something she doesn't fully understand, or is this kind of faith-driven love story exactly what she's always dreamed of? Your opinions fuel these conversations, so don't hold back. Now let's get into it. This season is pulling us in two directions, and both are equally jaw-dropping. On one hand, Lydia and Zach's relationship looks sweet, innocent, almost like something out of a storybook. They've been together for only a few months, and already they're planning their forever. No first kiss, no slow build, no testing the waters. It's faith, commitment, and speed. Zach's already gone to Barry to ask for his blessing to marry Lydia, and the timeline they've set has shocked even the most traditional corners of the Plath family. A proposal in 2 weeks, a wedding in 3 months. That's not just fast, that's lightning. And while Barry seemed surprisingly open, Lydia's brother Ethan was anything but thrilled. His silence when he heard the news spoke louder than words, and it exposed a deeper divide inside the family. The kind of divide that isn't going to go away with a smile or a pat on the back. But while Lydia is racing toward what she sees as her forever, Veronica is fighting tooth and nail to defend her place in Micah's life and in this family's chaotic orbit. Last season, her friendship with Mariah fell apart over a toxic relationship, accusations, and what Veronica believes were outright lies that painted her as the villain. Now the bitterness has spilled into full-on hostility. Mariah tried to mend fences with a letter, but Veronica didn't see it as an apology at all. She saw it as another way of dodging the truth, of refusing to own up to the betrayal. And that anger is bleeding into her relationship with Micah, who's being forced to confront the same painful choice Ethan once faced, siding with his girlfriend or staying in his parents' good graces. This is where the season gets dangerous because we're watching history repeat itself and the scars from the last time haven't healed. The Plath family has always been about control, about drawing lines between loyalty and betrayal, between who's in and who's out. Ethan's marriage to Olivia was the first major earthquake, splitting him from Kim and Barry and leaving years of bitterness behind. Now, with Olivia gone from the picture, Veronica is stepping into that same space of conflict, and she knows it. She's even reached out to Olivia, of all people, to compare battle scars. That decision alone tells you how messy this is about to get, because if there's one person the Plaths do not want advising their son's girlfriend, it's Olivia. And yet, that's exactly what makes this season so addictive. On one end, you have Lydia rushing into love with Zach in a way that makes you wonder if she's seeing clearly or if she's caught up in an idea of what love is supposed to look like. On the other, you have Veronica, who isn't playing sweet or passive. She's blunt, she's angry, and she's ready to push back against the family. These are not small storylines, these are collisions, each powerful enough to cause lasting damage. Think about the stakes here. If Lydia and Zach's wedding actually happens on this timeline, it could set off a chain reaction of conflicts with siblings who think she's moving too fast. And if Veronica's war with Mariah and Barry escalates, Micah might have to choose a side permanently. We've seen this play out before with Ethan and Olivia, and it tore the family apart. Do you think Micah's path will be any different, or are we watching the same cycle unfold all over again? The beauty of this season is how these two storylines don't just run parallel, they mirror each other. Both are about love, both are about family approval, and both test the limits of loyalty. Lydia is choosing Zach, possibly at the expense of her siblings' trust. Veronica is choosing honesty and confrontation, even if it means alienating Micah's parents. And standing in the middle of it all are Barry and Mariah and Ethan, reacting in ways that reveal their own fears, their own scars, their own inability to let go of control. And that's why we're here. To pull apart these moments, to hold them up, to question what they mean not just for the Plaths as individuals, but for the whole family dynamic. Because this isn't just about a kiss that hasn't happened yet, or a friendship that fell apart over a toxic boyfriend. This is about patterns that repeat, choices that echo across siblings, and a family that keeps finding itself split down the middle. So buckle up, because over the next half hour, we're going to walk through both of these stories in detail, and we're not holding back. Every moment matters. Every decision has weight, and every conversation, whether whispered or shouted, is shaping the future of this family. Stay with me, because the twists you're about to hear are only the beginning. When Lydia Plath sat there with that quiet, almost shy smile and admitted she hadn't even kissed her boyfriend Zach, you could almost hear the collective gasp of the audience. Not kissed, not once. In today's world where relationships often sprint through milestones at breakneck speed, Lydia and Zach have chosen something radically different: to wait until marriage for that very first kiss. For some, this confession felt tender, even beautiful, a living testimony of faith, conviction, and restraint. But for others, it sounded like a flashing red light, the kind of decision that makes you wonder, is this devotion, or is it naivety dressed up as purity? Let's break this down. Lydia grew up in one of the most conservative, faith-driven households on reality television. From day one, her entire identity has been shaped by rules, boundaries, and the idea that obedience equals righteousness. Unlike her older siblings, Ethan, Mariah, even Micah, who broke free, questioned, and rebelled against their parents' rigid beliefs, Lydia was always the good one. The quiet girl who sang worship songs, prayed in her journal, and clung to her parents' worldview as though stepping outside it might shatter everything she believed in. So when Zach entered the picture, it wasn't just about attraction or compatibility. For Lydia, it was about finding someone who could mirror back the same values she's been taught to hold sacred. That's what makes this love story so pure in the eyes of her family. Zach isn't just her boyfriend, he's the embodiment of the life Lydia has been preparing herself for since she was a teenager. But here's where things get complicated. Purity is one thing, speed is another. Zach didn't waste time. Just months into the relationship, he was already talking about forever. Not the casual someday we'll get married conversations most young couples toy with, but serious, imminent, life-altering plans. And then came the moment that left viewers stunned: Zach sitting down with Barry Plath, Lydia's father, to ask for his blessing to marry her. The room felt heavy. Barry, who's no stranger to control when it comes to his children's choices, surprised everyone by responding with calmness, even support. He didn't throw up barriers, he didn't interrogate Zach, he didn't caution him to slow down. Instead, Barry granted his blessing, almost like he'd been expecting this all along. For Lydia, it was a dream come true. For Zach, it was a green light to sprint toward the proposal. But for everyone else watching, including some of Lydia's siblings, it was a moment of shock. Because let's be real, a relationship that hasn't even shared its first kiss, racing toward engagement and marriage in less than a year, feels less like wisdom and more like a train barreling forward with no brakes. And that's where the tension begins to creep in. Ethan, Lydia's older brother, didn't hide his skepticism. When he heard the news about the timeline, Zach planning to propose in 2 weeks with a wedding just 3 months later, his silence was deafening. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words, and in that pause you could feel all of Ethan's disapproval boiling beneath the surface. It's not that Ethan doesn't want happiness for Lydia. Of course he does. But he knows better than anyone what happens when you rush into forever without fully understanding who you're tying yourself to. Ethan lived that story with Olivia. He dove headfirst into love, clashing with his parents, thinking faith and feelings would carry him through. Instead, he ended up alienated from his family, pulled into years of bitter conflict, and eventually divorce. So when Ethan looks at Lydia, he doesn't just see his little sister smiling about her first romance. He sees himself, years ago, about to walk into a storm he couldn't have imagined. And that's what makes his silence so haunting. This is where the story splits viewers right down the middle. Some fans see Lydia and Zach as a shining example of conviction in a world where relationships are often messy and disposable. They admire their decision to wait until marriage, calling it old-fashioned in the best sense. To them, this is what true faith looks like: self-restraint, commitment, and trusting that love will blossom without physical shortcuts. But then there's the other side, the skeptics. The ones who see this entire storyline not as sweet but as dangerous. They argue that Lydia and Zach are confusing discipline with denial, that they're mistaking adrenaline and idealism for true compatibility. These critics point out the obvious. How can you truly know if you're ready to marry someone if you haven't even shared something as basic, as human as a kiss? It's not about the kiss itself, it's about intimacy. Testing the waters, learning who the other person really is when the shiny glow of newness wears off. And that's where the suspense builds. Because we, the audience, know what Lydia doesn't. We've seen the cycles repeat in this family: rushed commitments, rigid rules, the fallout when reality collides with fantasy. Imagine Lydia on her wedding day, walking down the aisle, heart pounding, nerves electric. That first kiss, the one she's saved for so long, will happen under the watchful eyes of her entire family, her entire faith community, and millions of viewers at home. Talk about pressure. What should be a private, tender moment has been turned into a performance. And that's just the beginning. Because after the kiss comes the marriage, and after the marriage comes real life. Will Lydia and Zach's faith-driven foundation be enough to sustain them? Or will cracks appear once the idealism fades and the daily grind of building a life together begins? These are the questions hanging in the air. Questions the family is too polite to ask directly, but you can feel them pressing in from all sides. For now, Lydia is glowing. She sees herself as finally stepping into her own story, no longer just the background sister who quietly held the family together. This is her time, her love, her happily ever after. And Zach, he looks at her like she's the answer to every prayer he's ever spoken. It's hard not to root for them, even as you brace for the potential disaster. Because here's the truth. Whether this ends in a lifelong love story or a cautionary tale, Lydia and Zach are forcing this family and all of us watching to wrestle with a bigger question. Is love stronger when you slow it down and test it, or when you leap in with blind faith? And as this season unfolds, that question is going to linger in every scene. Ethan's quiet judgment, Barry's surprisingly open approval. The whispers of siblings who wonder if Lydia's about to repeat history. Every look, every pause, every conversation around the dinner table is another layer of suspense, building toward a moment we all know is coming: the proposal and the family's reaction to it. Because if you thought Ethan's silence was powerful, just wait until this engagement is official. The lines will be drawn, the support will fracture. And Lydia's choice will become the next great divide in a family already split down the middle. It begins innocently enough. A boy meets a girl, they fall in love, they dream about forever. That's the story we've all heard 1,000 times. But when Zach sat across from Barry Plath, Lydia's famously rigid father, and announced his plan, jaws dropped across the living room and across America. 2 weeks, that was the timeline Zach laid out for the proposal. Not 2 years of steady dating, not even one full year of shared experiences. 2 weeks. And then with an almost disarming calm, he dropped the second bomb, a wedding set for just 3 months later. 3 months. To anyone outside the walls of this family, it sounds reckless, irresponsible, almost unthinkable. But inside the Plath household, something stranger happened. Barry didn't fight it. He didn't scold Zach for rushing. He didn't shield Lydia from what the rest of the world was calling madness. Instead, he leaned back, smiled faintly, and gave his blessing without hesitation. Oh yeah, you got it, just like that. As if Lydia's hand in marriage were the easiest thing to grant. This moment was more than surprising, it was almost surreal. Barry, the same father who once policed his children's music, friendships, and independence, suddenly seemed eager to hand over his daughter's future after only a few short months of courtship. Why? That's the million-dollar question. Some viewers see this as Barry choosing to trust Lydia at last, a symbolic loosening of the reins after years of authoritarian control. Others suspect something darker, that Barry isn't so much supporting Lydia as he is endorsing the version of her that never rebelled, never fought back, never walked away. To Barry, Lydia is the one child who stayed loyal, who kept the faith, who didn't defy him. And maybe, just maybe, this fast-track marriage feels like a reward for her obedience. But while Barry beamed, another voice in the family wasn't so quick to cheer. Enter Ethan. The camera caught his reaction perfectly. Lydia and Zach dropped the engagement bombshell, and Ethan just sat there, quiet, frozen, stone-faced. No congratulations. No enthusiasm, just silence so thick you could cut it with a knife. That silence said it all. Ethan knows what it's like to leap headfirst into marriage with more passion than preparation. He married Olivia young, convinced that love and faith were enough to weather anything. What followed was years of turmoil, estrangement from his parents, battles over loyalty, and the slow unraveling of a marriage that ended in heartbreak. So when Ethan hears Lydia gush about God winks and divine timing, he doesn't hear romance. He hears warning bells. He sees his little sister running straight into the fire he himself barely escaped. And then Ethan did what Ethan always does when the pressure mounts. He dropped the blunt truth. You meet a guy for 3 months and you tell me you're going to get married. It doesn't make sense. No soft edges, no sugarcoating. Ethan wasn't going to clap for a decision he believed was naive. To him, this wasn't love, it was blind faith masquerading as destiny. That one statement cracked the room wide open. Because now Lydia's love story isn't just about Lydia and Zach. It's about the generational fault line running straight through the Plath family. On one side, Barry, the patriarch, quick to bless, quick to endorse, eager to see his obedient daughter settled in marriage. On the other side, Ethan, the son who left, the son who questioned, the son who sees danger where Barry sees devotion. And this is where the sibling tension explodes. For Lydia, Ethan's hesitation feels almost like betrayal. She finally found the love story she's been dreaming about, and instead of celebrating, her brother is sitting there poking holes in it. From her perspective, this isn't support, it's sabotage. But for Ethan, silence would be the greater betrayal. He knows what happens when you don't question, when you don't slow down, when you dive in without asking the hard questions. He's lived the fallout, and if speaking up makes him the villain in Lydia's story, so be it. The result, a subtle but undeniable fracture between siblings. Lydia's radiant optimism versus Ethan's hardened skepticism. It's not just two perspectives on love, it's two worldviews colliding. And let's not forget the rest of the siblings watching this unfold. Mariah, already scarred from her own failed relationship, can't help but see the parallels. Micah, trying to find peace between loyalty to family and loyalty to his own independence, seems wary of getting pulled into another fight. Even Kim, though largely absent from this particular storyline, casts a long shadow, because this generational divide is ultimately her legacy. The kids who broke away from strict rules now look at Lydia like she's sprinting headlong into the same cycle they fought so hard to escape. That's what makes this storyline so explosive. It's not just about Lydia's decision, it's about what it represents. To Barry, it's proof that his way still works, that at least one child believes in the values he drilled into them. That purity, obedience, and faith lead to stability. To Ethan, it's proof that the family hasn't learned a thing. That history is doomed to repeat itself, this time with his sister on the chopping block. And to the audience, it's a tug of war between wanting to protect Lydia's innocence and wanting to see if maybe, just maybe, her blind leap of faith will actually work out. The suspense is in the contrast, Barry smiling, Ethan frowning. Lydia glowing, Ethan brooding. One generation rushing to endorse, another generation desperate to slow down. And in the middle of it all is Lydia herself, torn between the brother she admires and the father she trusts, between faith in her love story and the storm clouds her family can already see on the horizon. While Lydia and Zach's whirlwind romance was stirring up shockwaves in Georgia, down in Florida, another fire was quietly catching flame. This one didn't start with a wedding ring or a father's blessing. It started with trust, loyalty, and betrayal. And the person caught in the crosshairs was Micah's girlfriend, Veronica. At first, Veronica seemed like a breath of fresh air in the Plath orbit. She was independent, worldly, and not afraid to stand her ground. Micah, who had been testing his freedom away from the strict family rules for a while, looked happy with her. For once, it felt like maybe he had found someone outside of the chaos who could keep up with him. But on Welcome to Plathville, peace never lasts long. The trouble started when Veronica's name got pulled into old drama involving Mariah. Specifically, Mariah's ex-boyfriend, Veronica, at some point had a connection there, and suddenly lines were blurred. For Mariah, it wasn't just about an ex, it was about loyalty. And in her eyes, Veronica crossed a line you don't come back from. You could see the shift in Mariah's face when the subject came up. She didn't dance around it. She didn't sugarcoat. To her, Veronica wasn't a friend anymore. She was competition, maybe even a traitor. And that's when the hammer came down. Mariah made her position clear. She wasn't siding with Veronica, she wasn't forgiving, she wasn't overlooking, she wasn't pretending it didn't sting. In Mariah's world, Veronica was now on the outside. That decision had ripple effects that reached all the way back to Barry. Now, Barry Plath has never been shy about pointing fingers. Throughout the show's history, anytime there's conflict, his first instinct is to figure out who's rocking the boat. And when Mariah, his daughter, raised concerns about Veronica, Barry didn't hesitate. He decided Veronica was the problem. It's a pattern we've seen before. Whether it was Olivia being blamed for Ethan's rebellion or Kim accusing outsiders of corrupting her children, the narrative always seems to land on the same point. When the Plath kids stray from the family's expectations, the outsider is cast as the villain. For Olivia, it was being painted as manipulative and divisive. For Max, it was being seen as too worldly for Mariah. And now for Veronica, it was suddenly being branded as the wedge driving tension into the family. But here's the thing, Veronica wasn't some scheming outsider plotting to tear siblings apart. She was dating Micah, living her life, and trying to build connections with people who were already navigating years of fractured relationships. So when Mariah flipped on her, it cut deeper than just a fight over an ex. To Veronica, it was betrayal. Imagine trying to integrate into a family as complicated as the Plaths. You're already walking on eggshells, already aware of the past conflicts, already cautious about where you step. Then, just when you think you're finding your footing, one of the family members turns on you, and the patriarch puts a target on your back. That's where Veronica found herself, cornered, judged, and scapegoated. And the pain was written all over her. Veronica wasn't shy about expressing how blindsided she felt. She thought she and Mariah were close, or at least on their way to building a friendship. But when push came to shove, Mariah made it clear blood was thicker than friendship, and Veronica was out. It wasn't just a fight over loyalty. It was a reminder of how the Plath family operates when conflict arises. Outsiders don't get grace. Outsiders get blamed. And for viewers, this was déjà vu. Olivia had been through it. Max had been through it. Even Kim's estranged friends and allies had felt that cold shoulder before. Veronica was simply the latest name added to the list. For Micah, this was especially tricky. He liked Veronica, he wanted her in his life. But the Plath family history had already taught him how dangerous it is when your partner becomes the center of family conflict. He had watched Ethan and Olivia implode under that pressure. He had seen Mariah and Max fall apart. So the question hung in the air, would Micah stand by Veronica, or would he fold under the family pressure? That suspense made the storyline impossible to ignore. Because here was Veronica, heart on her sleeve, pointing out the unfairness of being cast as the villain. And here was Mariah refusing to back down, convinced she had been wronged. And here was Barry doubling down on his favorite narrative, when in doubt, blame the outsider. The emotional weight of this storyline hit hard because Veronica didn't grow up in the Plath house. She wasn't conditioned to handle these cold wars and silent treatments. To her, it was shocking. To the Plaths, it was just Tuesday. And in the end, Veronica's pain became symbolic of a larger truth. No matter how much the Plath kids grow, no matter how far they move from their parents' rules, they carry that instinct to cast someone else as the enemy. If there's one thing about Mariah Plath, it's that she's never been afraid to stand in her own truth, even when that truth is messy. She has been the rebel, the dreamer, the girl with the pink hair and the guitar in her hand. She's walked away from her parents' rules. She's stumbled through heartbreak, and she's admitted to making choices that didn't always turn out the way she imagined. And in this season of Welcome to Plathville, that honesty cut straight into the heart of her friendship with Veronica. The tension had been building ever since Veronica's connection to Mariah's ex-boyfriend came to light. For Mariah, this wasn't just gossip or a misunderstanding. It was personal. That relationship had been one of her most vulnerable experiences on the show. We all saw her go through the breakup, the tears, the late-night reflections on what it meant to love and lose. So when Veronica entered the picture with ties to that same ex, Mariah felt a line had been crossed. But Mariah didn't stop at finger-pointing. In a rare moment of vulnerability, she confessed to her own part in the cycle. She admitted she made mistakes when it came to her ex. She knew going back to him, time and time again, wasn't the healthiest choice. She could see now that she had ignored red flags, had let her heart lead her into repeated pain. And yet, even knowing the consequences, she owned the fact that those choices were hers. It was a powerful moment because Mariah wasn't trying to paint herself as the victim. She was saying, yes, I messed up, Yes, I went back when I shouldn't have. But those were my decisions, and they were mine to live with. For viewers, this struck a chord. How many of us have stayed in relationships longer than we should have? How many of us have told ourselves it would be different, this time only to face the same heartbreak again? Mariah's willingness to lay that bare made her relatable, human, and raw. But then came the harder truth, the part that directly pulled Veronica into the storm. Mariah explained why she cut ties with her. She said loyalty was non-negotiable for her, that no matter how much she wanted to trust Veronica, the connection to her ex felt like betrayal. To Mariah, it wasn't just about a man, it was about respect. And in her mind, Veronica had stepped into territory that no friend should cross. Her words weren't screamed, they weren't cruel, but they were final. Mariah wasn't leaving the door cracked open for reconciliation. She was saying, I love you, but this is where the road ends. And that's the part that hit like a gut punch. Because this wasn't just the loss of a friendship, it was the loss of trust, of laughter, of late night talks. Veronica wasn't just Micah's girlfriend. She had been part of Mariah's inner circle. Cutting her off wasn't easy, but in Mariah's eyes it was necessary. And then there's Micah, caught in the middle, trying to love Veronica while also protecting his sister. For him, this wasn't just about choosing sides. It was about carrying the emotional weight of two women he cared about clashing, in ways that felt almost irreparable. On camera, you could see the toll it took. Micah listened to Mariah's pain, and you could tell he understood it. But you could also see the strain in his body language when Veronica voiced how scapegoated she felt. For Micah, every conversation felt like walking a tightrope, and no matter which direction he leaned, someone was going to feel abandoned. That kind of stress doesn't just vanish. It builds, it lingers, it changes the way you look at your relationships. For the audience, this was one of those who's right, who's wrong moments that sparks debate long after the episode airs. Some sided with Mariah. They argued that friendships have boundaries, and Veronica crossed one that should have been obvious. They saw Mariah's stance as strong, as self-respecting, as her way of drawing a line in the sand, after years of giving too much of herself in relationships. Others sided with Veronica. They pointed out that Veronica didn't seek to hurt Mariah, that her relationship with Micah shouldn't be overshadowed by Mariah's past, that the family's tendency to scapegoat outsiders was repeating itself again in plain sight. To those viewers, Mariah's decision felt unfair, maybe even hypocritical, given her own confessions about poor choices. And then there were those who couldn't pick a side at all. They saw two young women, both hurting, both navigating love and loyalty in messy ways, and both losing something precious in the process. What makes this storyline so compelling is that it isn't black and white. Mariah isn't a villain, and Veronica isn't an innocent angel. They're both flawed, both human, both trying to find their footing in a family that magnifies every mistake under the bright lights of reality TV. And when friendships collapse under those conditions, the heartbreak is different. It's not just personal, it's public. Every tear, every confession, every cutoff is replayed for millions of viewers. And that makes the pain harder to heal, because the wound isn't private anymore, it's a storyline. And so we're left with this haunting question: can a friendship survive when loyalty and betrayal collide? Or is Veronica destined to become yet another casualty in the long list of broken bonds in the Plath family's orbit? When the dust began to settle after the blow-up between Mariah and Veronica, fans hoped for some kind of reconciliation. Maybe not a full repair of the friendship, but at least a moment of accountability, of healing. And that's where Mariah's letter came in. On paper, it was supposed to be an olive branch, a heartfelt apology letter sent from one friend to another, a chance to clear the air without the heat of face-to-face confrontation. But in true Plath family fashion, what should have been a bridge became yet another battlefield. Mariah poured her feelings into that letter, admitting her part in the tension, expressing regret for how things spiraled, and trying to soften the edges of her earlier decision to cut ties. She wrote about loyalty, about friendship, about the mistakes she made with her ex. She said she wished things had been different. And for viewers, it read like the kind of cathartic confession that might have allowed these two women to at least coexist again. But when Veronica read the letter, her reaction was not relief, it was fury. Because in Veronica's eyes, the letter wasn't an apology at all. It was another example of Mariah skirting accountability. Yes, Mariah admitted she had gone back to her ex. Yes, she admitted she had flaws. But what she didn't do, Veronica pointed out, was take ownership for lying. That word lying became the fulcrum of Veronica's anger. She felt that Mariah had spun her own narrative, framing herself as messy but ultimately honest, while conveniently erasing the parts where she hadn't told the truth about the timeline of her relationships, or about the boundaries she expected others to keep. Veronica insisted that she was painted as the villain, while Mariah quietly glossed over her own contradictions. So when fans expected Veronica to accept the letter as a peace offering, what actually happened was the opposite. Veronica doubled down. She told those close to her that she was treated like garbage by people who were supposed to welcome her in, that she was dragged into a family conflict she never started, and instead of anyone saying, "I'm sorry," she was left holding the blame. And that's what hardened Veronica's view. This wasn't just a fight with Mariah anymore. It was a revelation of how Micah's entire family really saw her. She realized she was always going to be an outsider, someone tolerated, not embraced. And when Barry labeled her the problem, it confirmed every fear she had simmering beneath the surface. Micah, of course, was caught in the fallout. For him, Mariah's letter was a lifeline, proof that maybe bridges could be mended, and Veronica's anger could subside. But for Veronica, the letter only deepened the wound. She saw Micah's optimism as naive, another example of him choosing family harmony over standing firmly by her side. And that wedge, family versus loyalty to her, began driving deeper into their relationship. For the audience, this moment felt like a turning point. It wasn't just about two young women fighting. It was about whether Veronica would ever be able to survive in the gravitational pull of the Plath family. History has shown us what happens to outsiders who clash with the core siblings and Barry. From Olivia to Max to Kim's extended critics, anyone who challenges the system is quickly labeled difficult, toxic, or disloyal. Veronica could see the writing on the wall, and instead of shrinking back, she leaned into her anger. She began to speak out more directly about how poorly she had been treated, about how she refused to be the scapegoat anymore. That fire inside her, that unwillingness to play nice for the sake of optics, is what set the stage for the next chapter. Because here's the retention booster, the quiet little seed planted for future drama. When Veronica hit that wall with the Plaths, she didn't retreat into silence. She looked outward. She looked for someone who understood what it felt like to be on the receiving end of this family's judgment. Someone who knew exactly what it meant to be scapegoated, isolated, and treated like a problem instead of a person. And who else fits that bill better than Olivia? That's right, Veronica reaching out to Olivia may be the twist none of the Plaths saw coming, but it's the natural next step in this unraveling. Two women, both labeled as troublemakers, both exhausted by Barry's authority and the family's insular logic. Imagine the power of those two voices aligning. Imagine the fallout when Veronica stops trying to win approval and starts building alliances with the Plath family's most notorious dissenter. And so Mariah's letter, meant to soothe, instead became the spark that hardened Veronica's heart, deepened the divide, and lit the fuse for the next explosive conflict. Because if Veronica and Olivia find common ground, the Plath family may finally face a reckoning they cannot contain. If you thought Veronica's anger was going to fade quietly, think again. Because instead of backing down, instead of swallowing the humiliation of being branded the problem in Micah's family, she chose to do something the Plaths will never forgive. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and dialed the one name that carries the heaviest, most explosive weight in this family's history, Olivia. Yes, Ethan's ex-wife. The woman Barry once regarded as a corrosive influence. The woman Kim and the siblings, often scapegoated when their carefully curated world began to unravel. Olivia, the eternal lightning rod. For Veronica, calling Olivia wasn't just about venting, it was strategy. From Veronica's perspective, Olivia had lived the nightmare she was now trapped in. Olivia had been blamed for the family's fractures, labeled manipulative, accused of sowing discord between Ethan and his parents. Yet time and again, Olivia tried to set boundaries, only to be dragged back into the endless cycle of control, rebellion, and guilt. To Veronica, Olivia was living proof of what happens when you stand your ground against the Plath system. You're demonized, but you survive. And survival was exactly what Veronica was after. She wasn't looking for forgiveness anymore. She wasn't looking for acceptance from Mariah or Barry or anyone else. She wanted validation. She wanted someone who could look her in the eye and say, "You're not crazy, you're not crazy, you're not wrong. They really are treating you like garbage." That's why she reached for Olivia. But here's why this move is so dangerous, not just for Veronica, but for Micah. Olivia is still radioactive in the Plath orbit. Even with the divorce from Ethan, her name carries scars. Every time she reappears, it reopens wounds that never healed. Ethan's decision to side with her over Barry, the screaming matches, the split holidays, the endless accusations of disloyalty. Olivia became the symbol of defiance, and the reminder that once a Plath chooses love outside the family, there's no going back. So when Veronica decided to align herself with Olivia, she wasn't just looking for advice, she was declaring war. She was telling Micah's family, "If you want to paint me as the villain, I'll stand shoulder to shoulder with the woman you feared most." And then came Veronica's philosophy, the one she voiced to her closest confidants: eye for an eye. If they were going to scapegoat her, she would expose their hypocrisy. If they were going to label her a problem, she would become their problem. To her, justice wasn't about apologies anymore. It was about balance. If Mariah could cut her off, if Barry could brand her toxic, then she would mirror that energy right back, unapologetically. This tit-for-tat mindset echoed eerily through the family's past, because years earlier, it was Ethan who had made a parallel choice. Faced with the impossible tug-of-war between loyalty to Olivia and submission to Barry, Ethan chose his wife. He walked away from his parents' control, and the fallout of that decision still haunts the family to this day. Now history threatens to repeat itself, only this time, it's Micah in the hot seat. That's the chilling part of this unfolding story. The parallels. Ethan once stood at a crossroads, torn between love and family. He chose love, and it fractured everything. Now Micah is inching toward that same precipice, whether he realizes it or not. Because make no mistake, if Veronica continues down this path, if she strengthens her alliance with Olivia, Micah will be forced to decide. He won't be able to play peacemaker forever. He won't be able to smooth things over with Mariah, while also standing by Veronica. And if Barry digs, as Barry always does, Micah will be cornered. The question is, will Micah follow in Ethan's footsteps, or will he do what Ethan could not, and choose his family over love? For viewers, this setup is electrifying, because it feels like deja vu, with higher stakes. The cycle of outsider versus insider, loyalty versus rebellion, is playing out again in front of our eyes. Veronica may not have the years of history Olivia does, but she has the fire, the anger, and the willingness to break ranks. And if the Plath family has proven anything, it's that once an outsider starts pushing back, the implosion is inevitable. And so we're left with the haunting echo of history. If Ethan lost his marriage by choosing love over loyalty, will Micah lose his family by making the same choice? Or worse, will Micah lose Veronica if he refuses to stand up at all? As we close this episode of Welcome to Plathville, one thing becomes painfully clear. This season is testing the very limits of love, loyalty, and family bonds. On one side, we have Lydia and Zach, a couple moving faster than most of us can imagine, driven by faith, devotion, and a belief in destiny. Lydia's decision to save her first kiss for marriage, and Zach's almost impulsive plan to propose and set a wedding within mere months, is a testament to their passion. But it also raises questions. Is this true devotion, or is it naivety, wrapped in religious certainty? Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Florida, Veronica is walking a completely different battlefield. Her conflict with Mariah, amplified by Barry's harsh judgment, has left her feeling betrayed and isolated. When Mariah's letter fails to satisfy her need for accountability, Veronica's anger deepens, pushing her toward one of the most controversial figures in the family's history, Olivia. Aligning herself with Ethan's ex-wife is not just a bold move, it's a strategic declaration that she will no longer accept being treated as the outsider, the scapegoat, or the problem in Micah's family. Both storylines, though different in tone, share a shocking similarity. Each exposes the fragility of relationships within the Plath family and the high stakes of family loyalty. Lydia and Zach's whirlwind romance tests the boundaries of generational expectations, while Veronica's defiance challenges long-standing patterns of control, favoritism, and judgment. Both arcs force us to ask, when personal conviction collides with family pressure, who will bend and who will break? The beauty of these stories is that they feel so real. We watch characters make choices based on love, faith, anger, and principle, and we see the ripple effects on everyone around them. Lydia's leap into marriage shakes the family structure in ways that provoke shock, doubt, and even resentment from her siblings. Veronica's resistance exposes cracks in the family's hierarchy, shining a harsh light on the consequences of outsider versus insider dynamics. As a viewer, it's impossible not to feel pulled into these dramas. You can empathize with Lydia's hope and excitement, while simultaneously understanding Ethan's caution. You can see Veronica's pain and frustration, while also appreciating Mariah's perspective and the difficulty of maintaining boundaries in a family that magnifies every misstep. These are stories about people trying to navigate the messy, often impossible intersection of love and loyalty. And here's the cliffhanger that keeps us coming back. What happens next? Will Lydia and Zach's fast-tracked romance survive the skepticism and pressure from their family? Will Micah be forced into the same kind of impossible choice that Ethan faced years ago, torn between Veronica and his parents' expectations? Will Veronica's alliance with Olivia ignite a confrontation that changes the Plath family dynamic forever? As we wait to see the next developments, one thing is certain: the Plath family continues to remind us that love, loyalty, and family don't always coexist peacefully. Sometimes, choices made in the heat of emotion ripple far beyond the individuals involved, leaving lasting consequences that can't be undone. Thank you for joining me today on Sister Wives Chapter. I'm Maya Rose, and I hope you're as invested in these twists, heartbreaks, and revelations as I am. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a moment of the drama. Like this video if you felt the tension, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Do you think Lydia and Zach are making the right choices, or are they rushing into heartbreak? How do you feel about Veronica standing up to Barry and Mariah? Stay tuned, because in the next episode, the pressure will only escalate, the questions will multiply, alliances will shift, and in the world of the Plaths, one wrong move can change everything. Will family loyalty hold, or will these relationships collapse under the weight of expectation? We'll find out, and you won't want to miss it.